In this lesson, you guys will be subtracting integers with a little help from Detective Pikachu. So some of this is not as difficult as you may think. It sounds very fancy, subtracting integers, but remember that integers are just whole numbers. So we may see some really easy questions, especially when everything is a positive integer. For example, 5 minus 4. You've been seeing that since first grade. 5 minus 4 is simply 1. 7 minus 2. Believe it or not, these are subtracting integers questions. So 7 minus 2 is simply 5. So Pikachu is happy. These are quite simple. But let's look at some examples that are a little bit more tricky, or according to Detective Pikachu, he calls them very twisty, and he's going to help us solve them. So these examples are going to contain negative integers. This first one here shows 5 minus a negative 4. Because that 5 does not have any sign in front of it, we would consider that to be positive, but then we're subtracting a negative integer from it. This tip here is really going to make it helpful. Two negative or minus signs next to each other will simply turn into a plus sign. So 5 minus a negative 4 is exactly the same thing as saying 5 plus 4. Don't know if you've heard the old adage of 2 wrongs don't make a right, but in math, 2 negative signs actually make a positive sign. So you can all do 5 plus 4, that equals 9. So 5 minus a negative 4 is actually just 9. Let's look at another example. 8 minus a negative 3. Because of what I just explained to you, those two signs that are next to each other, this minus sign and this negative sign, because they're next to each other, they're simply going to turn into a plus sign. 8 minus a negative 3 is the same exact thing as saying 8 plus 3, which simply equals 11. Here's a different type of example. Now we're taking a negative integer and subtracting 4 from it. So we have negative 5 minus 4. If you remember back to our adding integers lesson, when two integers have the same sign in front of them, you simply add them and keep the sign that you had to start with. So if you look, this has a negative sign in front of it. This has a minus sign in front of it. Remember, that really is the same thing, a negative sign and a minus sign. So because they have the same sign in front of them, we're going to think, okay, add. 5 plus 4 is 9. And then you go back to the original expression, and because they had negative signs in front of them, my answer is going to be negative 9. Another way that teachers like to look at this, they show you the initial expression, negative 5 minus 4. That's really exactly the same thing as saying negative 5 plus a negative 4. You're changing the negative sign into a plus minus. Oops, let me make that a little bit easier for you. A negative sign is the same thing as saying plus minus. So this equation here is now, or that expression is now an adding integers expression. And negative 5 plus negative 4, they have the same sign, so we're just going to add them and keep the sign, which is negative 9. Either way you want to look at it, you're adding them and keeping the sign that you started with. As you can tell by the look on Pikachu's face, he's still a little bit confused, so let's do some more examples. Negative 2 minus 3. The first thing I want you to notice when you see this expression is that both numbers have a minus sign in front of them. When you have this same sign in front of your integers, that means we're first going to add. 2 plus 3 is 5. And then you're going to keep the sign from the original expression. So negative 5 is going to be your answer. Here's another expression for you. Negative 2 minus a negative 3. The first thing you need to do is rewrite this expression. Remember that anytime you have these two signs, two minus signs or two negative signs next to each other, those two negative signs are going to turn into a positive sign. So we have negative 2 plus 3. That's now the expression we're concerned with. Now, if you notice, they have different signs in front of them. When you have different signs in front of your integers, you're going to subtract. So really what I have is 3 minus 2. Different signs means you're going to subtract. And then you're going to keep the sign of the bigger number. So this 3 here doesn't have a sign in front of it. That means it's positive. So after we're done, 3 minus 2, you all know is 1. It's going to stay positive because that 3 is our bigger number and it is positive. Here's another example. Negative 8 minus 9. Remember, they both have the same sign in front of them, so we're going to think add. And 8 plus 9 is 17. But because our initial two numbers were negative, it is negative 17. Another example here, 7 minus 10. Remember that if a number does not have a sign in front of it, so like this 7 here, there's no sign in front of it, that means that that number is positive. So if you want to, you can go ahead and put a plus sign in front of it. That doesn't really matter. But now we're going to look back. That means that we have different signs in front of our numbers. So we're going to subtract. And we're going to end up with 10 minus 7, which is 3. Now you need to look back at that expression that we had and see which one of the numbers is bigger. The 10 is bigger, and it had a negative sign in front of it, so our answer is negative 3. So that's that second part of the rule. The first part is if the signs are different, I'm going to highlight for different signs means you subtract, but then you need to keep the sign of the bigger number. And in this example, this 10 has the minus sign in front of it. That's bigger, so our answer is going to be negative. All right, here's some more examples. Negative 4 minus 12. By this point, I hope we understand same sign in front means we add. So 12 plus 4 is 16, and then keep the sign of the numbers that we started with. Negative 4 minus 12 is going to be negative 16. 12 minus 4. In this situation, this should just look like a normal subtraction problem to you, but it is also a subtracting integers problem. I just didn't want you to forget. 12 minus 4 is just 12 minus 4, which is simply 8. They have different signs in front of them. The 12 is really a plus 12, so different signs means you're going to subtract, and then keep the sign of the bigger number, which in this case is 12. All right, as a review, same signs, you're going to add and keep the sign. No matter what, if the two integers have either both positive or both negative, we're going to be adding them and then keeping the sign from the original expression. When you have different signs, so you have one positive number and one negative number, you're going to subtract them and keep the sign of whichever one is bigger. So let's look at two examples. Negative 2 minus 5. These have the same sign in front of them. Even though you could say it's a negative or a minus, whatever, they both show that minus in front of them. So we're going to add negative 2 minus 5. 2 plus 5 gives us 7. And our answer is going to be negative 7 because you keep the sign. Negative 2 minus a negative 5. Remember, anytime you have two negatives next to each other, it makes a positive. So I'm going to rewrite this as negative 2 plus 5. Now, I have different signs in front of these integers. I have a negative sign and a positive sign. So I'm going to subtract them. 5 minus 2 is 3. And then you keep the sign of whichever one is bigger. And if you look, this one is bigger. So our answer is also going to be positive. At the beginning of this lesson, Pikachu was quite sad, but I hope you as well have now understood how to subtract integers and are now happy. I hope you enjoyed this lesson. Have a great day.